back to another episode of the Nebraska Shoot Around Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Bigelow. Joining me, as usual, is Jacob Bigelow, and it is a good thing that we waited a day to record this. We are coming at you, recording this on Thursday night after an eventful appearance from Athletic Director Trev Alberts on his radio show on Husker Sports, or I guess Huskers Radio Network at this point. I guess, where were you when you heard the news, Bigelow?
I was sitting in my parents' living room, and then I got, I'm not kidding, like 7 text messages at once saying, turn the radio on. And I'm like, what happened? And they're like, well, just listen. And then I opened Twitter and turned on the radio, and we have news. And thankfully, we have something to talk about that's not another on-court loss. So,
yeah. We'll briefly mention that, but the news that we are talking about is Trev Alberts announcing that Fred Hoiberg will be back next season. He just kind of put the news out there on the radio appearance on Thursday night, and shared some of the details about how it's going to go down. It's basically the exact same playbook that he used with Scott Frost. So we now know that Trev has a go-to move with struggling coaches. A go-to
point in the season when to announce said go-to move with struggling coaches.
That is accurate. I kind of forgot about when he put that news out there with Frost. But anyway, details are his contract has been reduced down to $3.25 million. Hoiberg agreed to give up a $500,000 stay bonus, and the buyout has been reduced from the $18.5 million that it is now. It would have been 14.5 next year, or 15.5.
I think 15. I think 15 even, because he was at 3.5 a season. So I think 15 even.
So yeah, from 15 down to 11 million next year. So if they were to fire him after next season, it would only cost him 11 million instead of the 15 that it otherwise would have. So kind of those are the basic details. Again, just same as the Frost deal. Gave up some money, reduced his contract, reduced his buyout, and he gets to come back and try to get this thing back on track. And even use some of the same phrasing, talk about kind of agreed to metrics that Alberts isn't going to share. And they've been talking regularly, and Hoiberg laid out his plan for how they are going to get this turned around. And Alberts, it's impossible to say which factors weighed the heaviest in the decision, but he heard enough from about the plan for next season to move forward and give Hoiberg a chance to execute it. And I think, like we saw with the football team, that'll probably include some staff changes, and they're going to have to go out and Fred's going to have to change a little bit about the way he's operating here. I think that's pretty clear. I think just based on what we know, I think Nate Lenzer is probably pretty safe. Just he's the newest one. He just got here, and Hoiberg has been putting more and more on his shoulders in terms of local recruiting. He's been the one that's out there showing his face in public, in gyms. I mean, heck, Thursday night he was out there in Ashland watching Cale Jacobson drop 29, 9, and 7 in their sub-district final win. And he's been the one that's kind of been talking with the young guys that they're looking at. He's been out seeing Jake Brack. So Lenzer, I think you feel pretty good about him being back next year. And then beyond that, I think we'll have to see kind of what happens, what opportunities pop up for some of the guys that are here, and who else is out on the marketplace.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we've kind of been saying all year that this season felt much like the football season, and this just was the icing on the similarity cake today. Probably going to be a change, and so, like you said, probably some staff changes, probably some just philosophical changes in general. Just probably, just going to be a lot of moving parts, pieces, and change in approach to just how they do things. I think Trev alluded to it pretty well, when he said paraphrasing, you can't win in the Big Ten if you're, not tough and you don't play team defense. And I forget what the third thing he said was, but it was stuff we've talked about all year on here. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what comes about at the end of the season. It's kind of, it definitely made tomorrow night's, last home game a little more interesting than how I was feeling going into it at the start of the day. That's for sure. But, and, naturally it seemed like it was kind of a split reaction to this on social media tonight. So there's never a dull day here, right? Never a dull day with this athletic department, no matter what the win-loss record is. And here we go again, right?
Yeah. And Alberts did kind of lead off the, excuse me, did lead off the kind of conversation with, didn't mince words. He said the performance this season and throughout his tenure here has not been acceptable. And he said Hoiberg agreed to that. And you mentioned kind of the split reaction. I think this is where it does depart from football. I think Fred probably has much less support from the fan base, and we were kind of talking back and forth about this earlier, just via text. It's impossible to gauge kind of the total percentages of who's in favor of what, but I went through and watched or read as many of the replies to the statement that Alberts and Hoiberg put out together, the tweet from the Huskers account, and like 90% of the responses, I think, were pretty negative about it, not happy, sarcastic, just all those kind of range of emotions there. And with the football, there was signs of the progress they made. There were things that you could kind of cling to as, okay, maybe if you change a few of these things could click. There's nothing really redeeming about this season. And that's the difficult part, where it's going to change. It's going to, with Frost, you can see, again, a couple of tweaks and then maybe you can move it forward. It's hard to see or believe in that Fred's going to be able to get this turned around quickly based on what we've seen thus far. The difference is you can flip things in basketball a lot quicker than football, just based purely on the numbers involved. So, and we know that Hoiberg has been a winning coach in the past. When things clicked at Iowa State, that he was able to put out a team that was really good, that did play together, that was effective, that won NCAA tournament games. I mean, Fred's still the same coach. Yeah, exactly. So I think the question is, can you put that type of team together in Lincoln? And they have not been able to do close to that to this point. So how quickly can they get it turned around next year? Obviously, they've already got a good sized recruiting class coming in. We'll see kind of what happens via the transfer portal. We'll see what happens in terms of guys who choose to come back, who choose to leave. There's still a lot to decide in terms of what the team is going to look like next year, but there's a lot of things that are going to have to change. And Hoiberg, at least, I think this does kind of lend credence to kind of Hoiberg from the start has talked about Nebraska and the place it holds in his heart and his family history and all that stuff. And I think willing to accept the buyouts instead of just like, no, you want me to leave, then pay me my money, like that type of deal. Like that. We obviously know Frost is an alum.
What was the line Trev had? He's an alum. He's a brother. He's a Nebraskan. Something like
exactly.
that. Yeah.
But Hoiberg's not really any of those things, although he does have Nebraska family ties. But
he was born in Lincoln.
Yes.
Yep.
So I guess technically, yeah, native Nebraskan, but his hometown isn't in Nebraska. I guess is how you'd put it. But it does kind of show that and I know some people, just based on his demeanor and the way things have gone, people question like how bought in is Fred actually how much does he actually care? And I think kind of agreeing to these changes and giving up the money does point to, hey, he does want to get this right, and he thinks like that it's possible that he can do it. We'll see how much different this team can be next year than it is this year. But I think it is, again, it is kind of interesting. It does reaffirm what Hoiberg has said from the start in terms of what this job means to him. And it isn't just kind of a rebound job, a stepping stone. Like he does actually care. And now he's going to have to back that up with his actions day to day in terms of his involvement in recruiting, in terms of kind of the accountability factor in practice, all those things, because it is going to take a lot of work to get this program on track and playing winning basketball again.
Absolutely. I mean, I think if I remember right, I was in the room for the intro presser too. And I mean, I know it's been a long time since then, but I'm pretty sure back then he said that he wanted this to be his last stop. I think he really emphasized the family ties and everything going into that first season. But I think I remember him saying that, him and his wife wanted this to be his last stop. I thought it meant something that in the statement Trev said no one was more disappointed or frustrated with how this has gone than Fred. Yeah. I thought that definitely, I thought that meant something, and that echoed kind of the sentiment we've seen from him in these post-game press conferences that we've been sitting next to each other in. I mean, you can tell he's frustrated. I mean, you can also tell that, he still has belief that he can get it righted. I mean, it does in a way sound all too familiar, but I mean, when he was getting asked, after that Maryland game about fans leaving, and he was honest. He said, we got to give them a reason to be here. We got to give them a reason to want to come support and cheer for us, and when we start winning, we can do that. And I mean, it's just but and I mean, I think he believes in obviously believes in himself if he took the pay cut and everything. But I know personally, that this job means something to him. At least that's what I've gathered and what I've gotten. But what do I know? That's just my guess. It's but so that's roster questions. That's a good transition to senior day or senior night, which has become all too odd in this time we live in. Tomorrow night's game against Iowa, another wonderful 8:00 Friday night tip off at Pinnacle Bank Arena, the last home game of the season. How many guys were walking? Seven. We got seven guys.
Walk on Chris McGraw is the seventh to go with three guys that are definitely gone in Alonzo Verdes Jr., Kobe Webster, and Trevor Lakes. They are out of eligibility after this season. And then you've got the trio of juniors, Latme and Derek Walker and Trev McGowens, who could come back for another year if they wanted to because of the COVID eligibility freeze. Although all four of those guys have been in college at least 4 or 5 years. So those are the seven that will be honored. Obviously, Derek and Kobe already went through the senior day ceremonies last season, but it's going to be a little bit different in terms of that was an empty gym when they did it last year, and this year they're going to be fans in the arena. We'll see how many fans. I don't know what this announcement does to impact the turnout on Friday, positive or negative. I know Trev kind of encouraged the fans, urged them to show support for these guys, and I kind of did a little bit too in my column on Wednesday. If you want to go check that on hailvarsity.com, my Padding the Stats column, I kind of did in-depth look at Bryce McGowens and the season he's had, and just kind of like recognizing the talent and what he's accomplished, even if it hasn't come along with the team success that everybody would want. And then like these seniors have been through a lot. Again, none of these guys are happy about how the season has gone in. Like obviously the effort has been up and down, but it's not like all these guys are just mailing it in. Like Derek Walker, kind of the journey that he's taken, the effort, the energy, the work that he's put in. He's the only guy that's been here the entire time with Fred. Been here all 3 years. He went through a redshirt year, went through a suspension, went through COVID, and now he's kind of finally getting a chance to be the dude that they believed he could be when they recruited him to the program that first year. And Trev McGowens, obviously, we know what the season was supposed to be for him and Bryce, and to have half of it stolen from him from the broken foot, that's always tough. But even so, again, the defensive effort, the intensity that he brings on that side of the ball, I think deserves recognition. And so I think even if the season hasn't gone the way that everybody wanted, and it's not like all these guys are playing great basketball every time out there, but still, it's one last chance to kind of give some support to these guys, because again, they're not happy about how this has gone. I mean, they're the ones out there. This was their college experience. You only get 4, 5, 6 for some of these guys, 7 years, and you don't get a chance to do it over with. So they chose to come here to Nebraska, and it was interesting. We got to hear from Alonzo Verge Jr. He was the player that spoke at the pre-Iowa press conference and talked a little bit about kind of this season and coming here and what he's gotten out of this year and why he kind of what his motivations are. And he talked about his mom, and he's got a little daughter, I believe he said. So that's kind of what's been driving him. And he said he has learned a lot this year about running the point from coming and working with Fred and kind of taking on that role here. And obviously it's been kind of an up and down, a bumpy journey this season for Verge as the team's point guard, but it's what he signed up for, to kind of go through that learning experience. And he's had some personal tragedy that he's battled through this season. Obviously it hasn't gone in terms of team success, in terms of his own play on the court, in terms of the reaction from the fans. It hasn't gone any way that he would have hoped for, but he did speak out, like thank the fans and talk about how special he thought kind of the Nebraska support is. And obviously if there's one guy on this team that the fans, I think, have the least attachment to, it is him. But for the ones that have shown support, he really truly appreciates it. And so I think hopefully we get a good game here. Obviously, I'm not expecting to go out and win. I just hope that it's not what we saw in Iowa City, because these guys, I think, deserve at least a little bit of, like Fred said, hopefully you can go out there and give these guys something that they can remember fondly, more so than a lot of the games down the stretch here.
Absolutely. For those interested, Iowa is an 11-point favorite. That is the early spread. Hopefully, I saw Fred talked about his senior night. He said he didn't shoot it well, and he went home and kicked a lamp over and broke it. And that's that was an interesting little anecdote.
Well, and he's told this story about not playing well on his senior day, I think last year or previously, but I don't remember him sharing the lamp detail when he's told it before. So I don't know if make of that what you will, in terms of maybe his frustration level, what it's risen to this season, or to evoke those memories. But it was an interesting part of the press conference.
Then the other thing that, a lot of people were talking about, and you wrote a really awesome column about him, and it is likely the last game in Lincoln for one Mr. Bryce McGowens. So there was some talk about, are they going to honor, there's going to be the first freshman to ever get recognized on senior night, and that's obviously not going to happen. But you read a really awesome column about Bryce and had a good little thread about his synergy numbers. So, and that's another guy who obviously the talk this week has kind of been, how will we remember Bryce McGowens in a season that many people want to forget already, and it's not even over yet. So what did you see, doing a little dive into his synergy numbers? Yeah,
and I think in terms of the synergy numbers, it's, you look at him, 16 and change a game, second leading scorer among true freshmen in the country, behind only Paulo Banchero. And I haven't seen how that's changed the last couple of days. If Paolo had a bad game or two, that might have even gotten closer or flipped or whatever. But and to be able to do that, it hasn't been efficient, but you kind of look at the underlying numbers. He's shooting 41.2% on open catch and shoot jumpers in the half court, which is considered very good in terms of Synergy's rankings there. So like when he's getting good looks, he's knocking them down more often than not. That's in the 66th percentile nationally, and most of these are 3-point looks. On guarded catch and shoot jumpers, that number drops down to 21.3%, and he's gotten 13 more of those contested ones. And you look at his shots off the dribble, he's shooting 25% off the dribble in the half court. So he has not shot the ball nearly as well as I expected him to this season. But you kind of break down his shot profile, and a lot of that is because he is taking a lot of really hard shots. And when he gets the easier ones, he's done a good job of knocking them down. He's been very effective as a cutter. He's actually done all right as a pick and roll ball handler, mostly because of his ability to draw fouls. He's considered very good, 67th percentile as a spot up player. So all of these things are areas that the NBA scouts, of which there are going to be many in the arena on Friday. We were told at least 15, including some high level decision makers, to see Bryce against Keegan Murray round 2. So it's a big opportunity for Bryce on Friday, but I think all of these numbers point to the difficult situation that he's in. And he came to Nebraska because he wanted the chance to showcase his abilities. He wanted to be in a featured role, but that comes with its own difficulties if you don't get the right supporting cast that allows you to play to your strengths and to make things easier for you. And Bryce certainly hasn't had that this year. The floor spacing has not been good. There hasn't been a consistent there hasn't been consistent playmaking outside of him where he's really for long stretches of time he's been the only guy out there that we saw was at the Rutgers game, I think it was, where down the stretch there they gave him the ball and like, Bryce, go save us, and he kind of struggled in that situation. Like all of that is there, all of that contributes to the overall low efficiency in terms of he's shooting under 40% from the field. And I think that his performance this season has kind of dragged his draft stock down. But all of those are, like, if you look closely, there are things that I think NBA scouts will kind of grab onto and think, oh, there's something to like here. I think this season hasn't been ideal. He's done about as well as you can expect, considering the role he's playing, the situation that he's been in. It's disappointing that that success hasn't followed with this historic freshman year that he's had, because again, that's a record that nobody's really going to kind of celebrate because of the way that it's happened. But in terms of Bryce coming to work, he's obviously putting a lot of work in the weight room and continue to get stronger there. I think he's trying, like when he goes out there, his shot selection hasn't always been great this year, but again, that's part of the role that he's played, where he's had to take difficult shots, because if he's not taking a tough shot, then somebody else is probably taking a worse one. So that's all part of the learning experience for an 18-year-old kid playing in the Big Ten as the number one option. That is not easy, and I think all things being considered, he's done a pretty good job in that role. And then you talk about what he'll be remembered for. Hopefully, I think they're referring to the feature that I wrote on him, just in terms of his involvement in the community, being around young players, trying to inspire kids to work hard and to love the game, and showing up at, I think I talked to Thomas Villianco, who running V Hoops there, who works with a lot of kids, and through him, Bryce has had a chance to kind of help kids through workouts, kind of step in there and give his own advice and build relationships with those kids. And Thomas said He'll pop up at those kids' games on a weekend when he's off. Obviously, we know he goes to a bunch of high school games. He goes to other college games. It's a guy that just really loves basketball and loves being around the game, and that'll serve him well. And I hope that part of it fans remember down the line when you kind of look back on Nebraska's first ever 5-star recruit, where it didn't bring the results that it was hoping for, but he is a legitimately good kid, and tried to make the most of experience while he's here.
Yeah, well beyond his years, man. Well beyond his years. Listening to him talk, not your typical 19-year-old walking around embracing basketball in a state where it'll kind of always play second fiddle to football. And I know when you were talking to Thomas, you said Bryce had talked about coming back to host camps, like another former Husker who worked with Thomas and also was an NBA draft pick in Isaiah Roby. And we can only hope that I got to be around Roby for a couple years, and the kids always love that guy, man. The kids always love that guy. And we see the same with Bryce. And even when we were out in Grand Island for the Heartland Hoops Classic, I saw a couple kids in the McGowens brothers hoodies walking around. I mean, even if some older fans will forget about this season, or you don't know how they'll remember Bryce, I can tell you one thing's for sure, and it's that the younger basketball fans in this state, they've been impacted by Bryce, and they're going to remember him for a while, no matter where he goes.
Yeah. So that's a lot of the kind of non-basketball talking points so far. I suppose we do have to kind of dive into the on-court play at least a little bit here. Briefly, we'll touch on that Northwestern game. It was a 77-65 loss for Nebraska, and it's a deal where they dug themselves a hole early. They battled back, and then in the second half, things just kind of fell apart again. And once again, Northwestern lit them up from the three-point line. They matched their total from the first game with 13 threes, and Nebraska only hit 7. And you're just going to have a hard time winning with that big of a disparity, because the Huskers did have a slight edge in the paint from the free throw line. But you turn the ball over 15 times and you give up 6 more threes to the opposing team. That math just isn't going to work in your favor. And I think the part of this game that really sticks out to me and kind of illustrates where this program is right now was in the second half, where they ran a pick and pop for Pete Nance, who knocked down a 3 kind of during a little run for Northwestern, and Fred Hoiberg immediately called a timeout. They talk it over in the huddle. Next time down, they run a pick and pop, and again, they botch the coverage, and it gets another wide open look, and he knocks it down. Immediately after a timeout that was called specifically to address that very same thing, they blew it, their second chance. And that just kind of points to where this team is right now, and the collective basketball IQ, the attention to detail. It just isn't there with this team. And we see it all over the time. We see little instances of like, why are you doing that? What are you doing there? It just doesn't make any sense what they do a lot of the time. And this is a team that is lacking both physically in terms of physical traits, size, athleticism, and mentally. The collective basketball IQ is just not high enough to overcome their physical limitations. So if you're not going to be a team that plays really smart, anticipatory basketball, you better have some athletes out there that can go overwhelm the other team and just run and jump and do all that stuff. And Nebraska has neither. And that's why the Huskers are where they are now. We talked about this kind of throughout the season, but once again, this Northwestern game just reinforced that point.
Yeah, and I guess this one was different because I feel like the last couple games were home games. We've been talking about home games that we sat next to each other watching. I guess this game was different kind of for me because, I mean, you could see a lot of like visible – I think this was probably the most visibly frustrated that guys on the court looked. I think you could see guys jawing at each other, walking to huddles for timeouts. I mean, I think this was by far probably the most visibly frustrated that the guys wearing jerseys and not just the coaches looked on court during the game.
Yeah, definitely. And you can see, I think on that first one. CJ Wilcher kind of threw the hands up. Kobe Webster. I know there was one where Lat Mayan showed some frustration as well. So it's just kind of throughout the team. And that's when things do start to get bad, when the players kind of start bickering, when they come apart, is they've talked about even through all the struggles, how tight this team is, kind of separate from the actual basketball play on the court. So if you got guys turning on each other and getting frustrated with each other, and not the productive kind of frustrate where you hold each other and you push each other in practice to get things fixed, then that is kind of closer and closer to the danger zone where you can't really come back from. So hopefully, again, we talked about they get another crack at Iowa, who is fifth best offensive team in the country, according to KenPom. It's a team that if you do make those mistakes, they're going to make you capitalize. They're going to capitalize on them, and they're going to make you pay, which we saw was basically the entire story in the previous meeting in Iowa City, where they was 42-10. They closed the first half on, and a bunch of those were off of turnovers. They're off of missed bunnies, and Iowa was running the other way. And that's what they cannot afford to have happen on Friday. They've got to take care of the ball. They've got to finish their opportunities that they get, and they've got to rebound the ball too. They cannot lose the possession battle in this one, because Iowa is going to score the ball more efficiently than Nebraska is. They've just got more skill across the board, and they've got the best player on the floor in Keegan Murray. So you're going to have to find ways to win in the margins. And if you give Iowa more shots at the bucket, it's just not going to work out for you. So Nebraska has to play clean basketball to stay in this game. And it's going to be hard to play clean basketball when you guys are yelling at each other, and because guys are botching switches and not opening their mouths and talking through things.
Yeah, and I mean, we saw the result in Iowa City when this team tries to, in a way, out Iowa, trying to get in a track meet, trying to run with a team that's better than them at running up and down the floor, and that ended in disaster. I'm interested to see. We did see something in this Northwestern game that we had not seen all season, and kind of warmed my heart as a Tim Miles Nebraska basketball disciple, and that was a 1-3-1 zone defense from Fred Hoiberg's crew. I know Chris Collins said after the game he hadn't seen that look from Nebraska on film all year. I'm interested to see if they have that in the playbook for Iowa. I know zoning a team that plays like Iowa can be a recipe for danger really quick. I'm interested to see what adjustments are made after they played them the first time. Something I did not realize. I know I had a lot of fun making fun of Minnesota having never won at Pinnacle Bank Arena. Iowa has won at Pinnacle Bank Arena, but they have not won here since the Tim Miles locked his team out of the locker room game in the 2014-2015 season. So that was the last time Iowa won at Pinnacle Bank Arena. They won that game 74-46, and that was the Tim Miles wore a sweater, and then he locked his team out of the locker room game. Since then, they have lost 4 straight trips to Lincoln, and they haven't been here since Fred's first year, when they somehow lost with Luka Garza on the floor 76-70 back in January of 2020. So it's
the somehow is Iowa could not throw the ball in the ocean that day.
Yes,
yet they kept chucking it up there.
Yep.
But yeah, so
I figured you'd enjoy that little factoid.
I didn't realize it, but it probably should, because that's basically the entirety of me covering this beat. The 14-15 season was the last one before I started covering the team. So I have never covered an Iowa win in person. So did not realize that, but I probably should have. So it's definitely an interesting statistic. It's gonna take a lot to
keep that one alive. Absolutely gonna take a lot to keep that one alive. I guess we can kind of touch on the other 2 games. We'll have 3 games to talk about next week. Kind of hard to believe, but the other 2 trips are returning to the site of Fred Hoiberg's only road win as the head coach at Nebraska.
Shout out Teddy Allen.
Shout out Teddy Allen. They go to Penn State for everyone's favorite road trip out to Happy Valley. And then the rescheduled game. Oh, they only get I did not realize they get the 1 day between games. Yeah. They play Iowa late Friday. They probably travel Saturday and then play Penn State on Sunday. I did not realize that. Yeah. So not only do they get the 1 day prep, but they have to travel to the most secluded campus in the conference to play Penn State on Sunday. Yeah. And then the Ohio State game to follow on Tuesday. So 3 games in 3 games in 5 days. Feeling like the end of last season, but we'll have 3 games to talk about. We both caught the end of Ohio State and Illinois tonight. I will admit I have not watched much of Penn State. I do know they do have some familiar names still on the roster, and they have a fellow NBA guy and a coach in Micah Shrewsbury, who was on Brad Stevens' staff with my Celtics. So that is the extent that I know about Penn State basketball.
Yeah. Just kind of looking at that KenPom page, they're actually a pretty good defensive team, top 50 in the country, 46 in adjusted defensive efficiency, and they're 129th in offense. So not particularly good, but above average. They shoot it well enough from every area. They just don't get to the free throw line really at all. So they are, what are they now? They are, whoops. Apparently I hit the X button on the page that I was trying to look at.
Looking at their roster, they definitely hit the portal hard when Shrewsbury came in to replace Pat Chambers. They do have a few familiar names that some diehards may know: Miles Dredd, John Harrar, and Seth Lundy still on the roster. Those are names that I recognize as the Big Ten
last year.
Yep, as the Big Ten dork that I am. Those are names that I recognize for Penn State. But yeah, the Bryce Jordan Center. What a place!
What a 10th place with a 6-10 conference record. They are 11-13 overall. You mentioned hitting the portal hard. That their leading scorer is Jalen Pickett, point guard from Siena, who's averaging 13, 4, and 4. I know he was a guy that a lot of draft order people were excited about when he was younger, but just never really kind of came around for him. And he's only shooting 30% from 3 on 5 attempts a game. So he is their leading scorer, their best playmaker, but he's not a guy that's been super efficient. But they do have 4 guys averaging double figures. And you mentioned Hara, who's a near double-double guy. He is going to be a handful on the offensive glass, averaging 3.5 offensive boards a game. Derek Walker is going to have to be locked in on that end. He's going to have to keep him off the glass. Seth Lundy is a guy that is certainly capable of catching fire and going off. He's a guy that can hit tough shots, and he's shooting 37% from 3 on good volume. Sam Sessoms is a guy that can go get you a bucket as well. 11.5 a game, shooting 42% from 3. So it's a team that, I mean, it's not a great team, but you kind of look at the metrics and it's like, well, you can see areas where they can really hurt you. And they have a win over Iowa in double overtime. They beat Michigan State. They beat Indiana. So they've got some good wins. They're 6-10 overall. They beat Minnesota. They beat Rutgers. They beat Northwestern. So it's kind of like their wins are all over the map, basically. But it's a team that, I don't know. It's one that you go in like, oh, they got 0 shot, but it's also on the road, and this team just doesn't win. I mean, it doesn't really win much at all, period, but it especially doesn't win on the road.
Exactly. And then on Tuesday, the rescheduled game against Ohio State. We attempted to preview this second game against Ohio State a couple podcasts ago, and we said, see the preview for the first game against Ohio State, just include Malachi Branham. And Malachi Branham just keeps getting better. We saw his coming out party the first time Ohio State the first time these two teams met, and he has only gotten better since that.
Yeah, and he dropped another 30-point. His first 30-point game since that 35 he dropped on Nebraska. He has really kind of emerged as a key piece for them. They survived against Illinois. Actually, they built Ohio State built a big lead on Illinois and then gave it all back up and got it down to 2. And then they went back and forth down the stretch. And E.J. Liddell with a big defensive stop, forcing a turnover from Trent Frazier. Probably could have been a foul, but that's neither here nor there. You just kind of look at what Brandon's doing, and he's overall now is averaging 11.8 points a game and shooting 46% from 3. In conference play, he's averaging 15 a game and is shooting 51% from 3. So you take out kind of those non-conference games where he was kind of getting his footing in Division I basketball, and he has just been a bucket for them all conference season. 52% overall from the field, so he's scoring efficiently from 2 and 3, and he is the guy that absolutely won them that game because Nebraska shut down E.J. Liddell. Zed Key barely even shot the ball, finished with 7 points, only took 5 shots, I believe. So they shut down their primary offensive options, and Branham just came out of nowhere and won that game for them. He's not going to be coming out of nowhere this year. He's going to be high on that scouting report this time. Nebraska does have Trev McGowens, but you also have to anticipate that Liddell is going to give them more than he did last time because he is firmly entrenched in that conference player of the year battle that also doubles as the national player of the year battle, considering you'll probably see 4 or 5 Big Ten guys on the kind of the top 10 players in the country in terms of competing for national player of the year.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just night in, night out. I think we'll probably have to do a dive after the season, maybe around draft time, talk about how Nebraska did against guys that get drafted, because there'll be plenty from the Big Ten that wind up getting drafted, probably wind up on, first, second team All-Americans, and Liddell will be right there, man. 19 and a half points a game, 7.6 rebounds a game. And I mean, that's not bad for a 6'7" guy playing inside and in around the post most of the time. He's pretty good. But so yeah, we'll have 3 games to talk about next week. The news of the day, obviously, Fred Hoiberg will return for a 4th season. And we will have plenty to talk about next week. But in the meantime, man, I'll see you tomorrow. You got anything to plug on the website from the good people over at Hail Varsity?
Yeah, I mean, I've got my game preview, but I'm also gonna have a separate kind of story just on the seniors and hearing from Fred Hoiberg, hearing from Alonzo Verge, and just kind of focusing on them. Because again, they didn't ask for this situation. Things haven't gone according to plan, but they put in a lot of work, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears for the program. So hopefully that those guys will have a senior day that they can remember in terms of fans giving them a nice round of applause and all that. So I'll have that up on the website this weekend. Continuing high school basketball coverage as we head into postseason here. Coming up, the state tournament, we're getting closer and closer. Next week, we'll know who is going to be in the field. So I'm excited about that.
We've spent quite a bit of time at Pinnacle Bank Arena for the team we talk about on this podcast. We're going to be spending a little more time there as the boys and girls state tournaments are combined into 1 week. So we'll probably be able to talk about that once the regular season comes to a close, because after we talk to you next week, there'll only be 1 game left in the regular season and then a trip to the Big Ten tournament in Indianapolis for Nebraska.
Yeah. In the meantime, follow me on Twitter at Jacob Padilla _. Follow Bigelow at _Bigelow. Subscribe, rate, review to the podcast on your various podcast source, I guess, of choice. We appreciate. Spread the word. We'll see kind of what we do with this thing as we head into the off season here. We'll see kind of what happens with the roster decisions. We'll keep this going as long as there's something to talk about. So we appreciate you kind of sticking with us this season, and hopefully we'll have some good episodes here to close out the season. And until next time, this is the Nebraska Shoot Around Podcast.
Hurrdat Media Production.